Indiana must reduce the carbon dioxide its power plants emit by about a third in the next 15 years. The mandate comes as part of a new Environmental Protection Agency rules President Obama announced this week.
But this is one of those rare issues because of its magnitude, because of its scope, that if we don't get it right, we may not be able to reverse. And we may not be able to adapt sufficiently. There is such a thing as being too late when it comes to climate change.
The rules require each state to put together a plan by September of next year that outlines how it will reach the new EPA goals. Gretchen Frazee explains how that could work.
If you've ever driven through Carmel, Indiana, you've probably noticed a lot of these. Carmel has nearly 100 roundabouts, and each of them are estimated to save 25,000 gallons of gas each year.
Of course, it depends on the roundabout as to how much fuel is saved, but it's a lot. Take 25,000 gallons of gasoline times $3 or $4, and it's tremendous savings just for the public, and a lot less carbon gets burned.
Carmel Mayor Jim Brainerd is on the president's climate change task force and has pushed the city to reduce its carbon emissions by making it more walkable, creating a bike share program, and switching the streetlights to LED. Brainerd says while these steps can be significant, the state is going to have to do a lot more if it's going to make a real dent in its carbon footprint. Power plants are the biggest contributor to carbon emissions, so the EPA is requiring states reduce the amount of carbon dioxide those power plants produce. In Indiana's case, it can choose from two options: either cut its total carbon emissions from power plants by 28% or cut the amount of carbon dioxide produced per megawatt hour by 38%. Earlier EPA regulations and the low price of natural gas have already caused utilities to decide they're going to shut down some of their coal-fired facilities, like this Indianapolis Power and Light power plant in Martinsville. Right next door, an entirely new plant is being built to replace it. That new plant will run on natural gas, which burns about half as much carbon dioxide as coal.
This transition is already happening. I mean, the power sector across the country and here in Indiana is moving away from coal. There's no power company in Indiana that's planning to build a new coal-fired power plant. Our coal-fired power plants are old. They are looking at when are we going to retire them. And so the question is, what are we going to replace that with?
Environmental groups say the replacement should be renewable energy.
We need to require the utilities to generate more power from clean solar and wind power. Iowa today is already generating 25% of its energy from wind. Indiana, about 3 to 4%.
The coal industry, though, is pushing for more investment in cleaner coal technology.
Since 1970, the emissions from coal-fueled power plants have decreased tremendously. 85–90% sulfur and nitrogen. Particulate matter in the same periods down 96%, while we're producing 170% more electricity from coal. Now, you cannot get the same energy, the same BTUs from windmills and the gentle breezes that provide the energy to make energy for them.
Stevens says if the EPA gave the coal industry more time, it could adapt as it has in the past. But he says the EPA isn't giving them a chance.
We feel as though this is an environmental agency within the administration of the federal government that's in essence trying to seize control of the power grid rather than implement the actual environmental regulations, and that they are attempting to impact one energy source much more than any other, and as a result are trying to do away with the most affordable and reliable source of energy that the state of Indiana has.
The state could also opt for what's called a cap-and-trade program. That would allow Indiana to pay another state to reduce its carbon emissions more, and Indiana would get the credit. Right now, though, state officials are hoping the EPA's rules won't go into effect. Indiana and 14 other states are joining a lawsuit against the EPA, saying the rule is an overreach of historic proportion and goes far beyond what Congress authorized the agency to do. Utilities also argue the EPA rules will increase electricity rates.
Ultimately, if the rule is determined to be legal, if the rule is determined to be something that makes sense, we're going to have to deal with that outcome. But I also think that Indiana customers should not be asked to pay for something that down the road the courts may decide was not done legally.
Governor Pence says he's reviewing the EPA rules to determine if Indiana will comply. While the state decides what action it will take, Mayor Brainerd says cities and towns shouldn't sit by and wait.
We can't do anything about what Governor Pence does. He's our elected governor. But what we can do in our cities and towns is to reduce the carbon output, make our cities more competitive.
The EPA's new rule is complex. As we mentioned, state officials are still digesting what it all means. So to help us better understand the impacts of this rule, Ken Richards joins us. He's a professor of environmental economics and policy and adjunct professor of law. He's also worked with several national government organizations to help them develop their environmental policies. Thanks so much for being here. First of all, the EPA rule seems like it's going to bring about a lot of changes. Have we ever seen this before in the past where such a new regulation can create a shift in the energy industry?
Well, probably the closest analog we have, Joe, is the 1990 Clean Air Act amendments that substantially reduced sulfur dioxide emissions. That caused a tremendous shift, and it introduced a whole new approach to how we would regulate sulfur dioxide.
You know, we just saw in that story about the cap and trade program. Is that a viable way to meet the EPA's needs?
Well, the idea behind the cap and trade is that we have a lot of different types of emitters. We have a lot of different strategies for reducing emissions. And the cost for each of them is different. If we require everyone to make reductions, then we're going to have some low-cost emissions and, reductions and some high-cost emissions reductions. Cap and trade is just a way of allowing the low-cost emitters to do more than the high-cost emitters. It allows shifting the burden to where it's most cost-effective.
Now, the EPA allows energy efficiency programs to help meet the new regulation, and the Indiana legislature recently voted to do away with Energizing Indiana, which was Indiana's version of that. Are there any new energy efficiency programs that the state could use to help with this as well?
Certainly, there are all sorts of energy efficiency programs a state could adopt, everything from research to public information to actual new standards. The federal government is also contributing on this. So there are a lot of cooperative programs, building programs, appliance programs, and so on. And so there are many, many options, different tools the government can use for increasing energy efficiency.
And some environmental groups say low-income neighborhoods bear the brunt of power plant pollution, so cleaning them up could benefit them. Utilities, of course, are saying that the rates are going to have to go up, which I think is on everyone's minds. Do you agree with those two?
Both of them are correct. Yeah. It's almost certain that the rates will have to go up. That doesn't mean that bills will go up, because if we effectively deploy energy efficiency programs, then the actual total amount of energy reduced or consumed could be reduced. That means that the bill could be reduced. And then on the other side, there's no question that there are negative environmental impacts from power plants. The stated intent of this program is to reduce CO2 emissions, which is a global pollutant. But in the process of reducing emissions, CO2 emissions, we also reduce local pollutants. That should have some beneficial effects to low-income neighborhoods in the vicinity of the power plants.
Have there been any estimates for energy rate increases, or are those plausible?
Yeah, there have been. The thing to remember is that in 2014, the EPA announced a proposed plan. A number of different organizations modeled the extent of expected rate increases. They ran from anywhere from 1% up to 14% or even higher. But with this new plan, with a new distribution of goals, we're not ready to say yet.
All right. Well, thank you very much for being here today.
It's a pleasure.
Appreciate it.